These are remarks about mountain spirituality, which probably would have been a book, uh, probably would have been my second book that I would have written. My first one, Native American Pentecost, is on Amazon. I hope that you'll get a copy of it. But this probably would have been my second book if I was going to write another book. And I haven't done so because, well, frankly, my Indian friends asked me not to write any more books. So these are going to be thoughts, and I like doing them on video because they're more personal. And this second one is going to be on Bear Butte. And some of you in South Dakota, Oklahoma, North Dakota, New Mexico, Arizona know about this story because the word kind of got out when I was ministering in Indian country that I had had this experience. It all begins in the early 2000s when my daughter Leslie was barrel racing, and I looked towards trying to find a Christian rodeo camp somewhere out west we could take a vacation and Leslie could go get barrel racing training in a Christian context. And we found one in Bear, Wyoming, Cowboys of the Mission, part of YWAM. And because we were taking that trip out west, and I really hadn't explored the West very much in my life, except just, the movies and things. But did quite a bit of reading before we went. And one of the things that we did was we went to the Little Bighorn battlefield where Custer's Last Stand took place. And I remember we drove from Denver up through Wyoming to get to the Crow Reservation. And we got there about dark. The family was for the most part asleep in the car, and I went ahead and pulled up in the lot at the Little Bighorn battlefield just to get out, hop the fence, walk around in the dark myself. I was pretty excited about getting to see that place and all the myths that surround it, stories that surround it. And so I had a prayer. I knelt down and had a prayer out there on the battlefield. And it was kind of an interesting spiritual experience, but we came on back. We did the camp with Leslie in Wyoming and went to the Buffalo Bill Museum, Native American Museum, goes with that and all that. Came on back to Knoxville, where I was serving as a pastor. And as soon as I got back, I had a desire for my church to do a mission trip on Indian reservation somewhere. So I contacted the Church of God administrative bishop that was over the Dakotas, whatever that was called at that time. And he told me that there was a need to have a roof installed on the oldest Native American Church of God in existence. It was in Bear Butte, South Dakota, on the Cheyenne River Reservation. And he proceeded to tell me that Sitting Bull's descendants all attend that church, and the ones that are, in church. And I thought that was significant since I had just been and had that experience in regarding Sitting Bull, Little Bighorn, and all that. And so our church planned a mission trip to go out there. Well, to put a roof on a church, we were going to acquire the materials, as I recall, from Menards out there. It's the big Home Depot out west, and in a closer location to the reservation and so forth like that. And I had a builder in my church named Jim, who now's gone on to be with the Lord, but he agreed to fly with me out there for a survey trip to measure the roof of the sanctuary, and so we could order material and all for the trip that we were going to take. And so shortly before we were supposed to fly out to do that survey trip, Jim had to go in for bypass surgery, and I was left to go alone. I told Kim, I said, anytime that I'm scheduled going on a trip with somebody and they cancel out and I'm left alone, I'm reminded of Jacob being left alone. He had that experience with God at Peniel. So I told Kim, I said, just pray that I'll make whatever connections the Lord wants me to make and so forth. So I prepared to fly out, and I flew out to Rapid City and rented a car and spent a couple of days in the vicinity from Rapid City up, and as you go up toward Cheyenne River, that area there. And so I got in the rental car, and I went on and I measured the building. A native man helped me do it, and I thought it was interesting because his daughter was in a basketball camp in Knoxville while I was going out to work with him. I thought that was interesting, me having come from Knoxville. So we measured the building. Pastor was nice to me. She's an African-American woman. Pastored this Church of God, Eagle Butte Church of God, and so forth. But, it wasn't no monumental experience I had there, nothing like I was kind of thinking I was going to have. And then when I completed the measurements, and drawing up the sketches, I proceeded to head back to Rapid City. Well, at one point, I was going through Sturgis, South Dakota, and I was on the cell phone with Kim, and as I was going down the road out in the country, I saw a mountain. And even now, having spent 15 years in and out of the western part of the United States, buttes and mountains are not that uncommon. Why this one got my attention, I would soon come to realize. But when I saw the mountain, it got my attention, and I told Kim, I said, I'll call you back. I'm going to pull over and look at this mountain. I don't know, it's something special. So hung up the phone, pulled the car over, and got out of the car and walked along the shoulder of the road looking at this mountain and looking for signs that would tell me, what the significance of it was, if it had any historical significance. And I didn't see any signs. And I realize now it's because I think I was on the Cheyenne side of Bear Butte, but I didn't know what the mountain was, and I didn't see any signs. So I drove on to Rapid City, and before I was to fly out, I wanted to go by and visit the Crazy Horse Monument, which is right near Mount Rushmore. All the visitors that would come visit me out there when I was living in the area always wanted to go to Mount Rushmore, but Crazy Horse Monument to me is much more interesting. And so they have probably one of the best Native American bookstores in the United States there, and I happen to know the man who runs it or set it up. And So I went to Crazy Horse Monument, enjoyed that, and then went to the bookstore. And when I went to the bookstore, I was walking along the aisle and looked in the books and saw this book, Bear Butte, Journeys to the Sacred Mountain. And I recognized that this was the mountain, Bear Butte. And it was written by a ranger, who I would soon come to find out was Cheyenne, and his name is Charles Rambo. Call him Chuck Rambo. All right, so I bought the book, and there's Chuck right there. But I bought the book, and then I was going to read it on the plane, and I also got another book autographed on Crazy Horse and so forth. So by this time, I had done quite a bit of reading, Native American spirituality, and preparing myself for any time I would spend out in Lakota country, Cheyenne country, which I was very interested in. So I went on to the airport in Rapid City with this book in my hand, ball cap like this, not looking like a preacher or anything. Although at this point I was a pastor of a pretty strong established church in Knoxville. And so I went on to the airport, and when I was going through the security, the radar, all that, the x-ray, what do you call it, overheard a tall Indian man, tall Native American man, say to his wife, "I need to talk to this man." Well, I went on to the gate and didn't think too much about that, sat down in the gate, and pretty soon his wife came around the corner and sat down beside me and patted me on the back and said, my husband's going to speak to you. And she said, "It's pretty special. He rarely ever does this, and I'm really happy for you to have this experience." So I'm a Pentecostal preacher, so it's nothing out of the ordinary for people to stop me and speak strange words over me or something. And after a number of years, you begin to take all that stuff with a grain of salt. But I waited for him, and he came around. He's very dignified looking. And he saw the book in my hand, and he said, "What are you doing with that book?" And I said, "Well, I bought it at the Crazy Horse bookstore." And he said, "Why did you buy the book?" And I said, "Well, I'd seen this mountain in Sturgis, South Dakota, and it got my attention. So when I got down to the bookstore, I recognized it on this book, and that's what I saw." And then he proceeded to ask me, "Did you get out of the car when you saw it?" Which I thought was kind of strange. But I said, "Yes, I did." And when I had gotten out of the car at the mountain, I had a very profound spiritual experience with God through the Holy Spirit, and even felt like I had lost track of time there for a little bit. It was a very spiritual experience, standing in front of that mountain and praying. So anyway, he sat down and he began to explain some things to me. There's just the little notes and drawings that he did in the back of the book for me to he was wanting to help me understand what had happened to me. And his wife kept saying, "Well, this is wonderful, which is a great day." And so I heard all that, and I thought, wow. And he said, "Well, I want to prepare you. You have a work to do in South Dakota for God." He said, "You're some kind of minister, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And so he said, "Well, prepare yourself. You got a work to do out here." I thought that was pretty interesting. So anyway, we parted ways, got on, I think we flew on the same plane to Nashville, and then I think we split up. I think they went a different direction than me. But when I got home, Kim said, "Well, how did that go?" And I said, "Well, it was good." I said, "Weird." She said, "Why was it weird?" And then I explained to her what had happened about my experience and all that. And then the man stopping me, who, by the way, his name is J.C. Heigl, and there's a chapter written about him in this book, and which, he said, "I'm in that book." I said, "Hand it to him, show me, And so he said, I had work to do in South Dakota. And she said, what are you going to do about that? I said, well, I'm going to call this ranger who wrote this book and ask him if, since he's got a chapter about this man in here, ask him if he's on the level, you know. And so I did. I called Chuck Rambo, and he answered the phone, and I told him that I had had an encounter with J.C. Elliott, whose Indian name is High Eagle. And, you know, was he on the level? I knew he had written a chapter. He said, well, anything he says you can take to the bank. He said he's highly regarded, honored Cherokee elder from Oklahoma. So anyway, he asked me, he said, well, when you saw the mountain, did you get out of the car? And I said, darn it, that's what he asked me. What's that about? And he said, well, what you need to know is this is not the first person, you're not the first person to have this happen to them. He said, often when God, he said, you know, God lives on Bear Butte much of the way he does on Mount Sinai. And he said, you understand that? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, well, we asked you if you got out of the car because the protocol in going to pray on Bear Butte, he said, is that you pull up to the road and you get out of the car and you pray a prayer to be accepted and prepare your heart to drive closer and then to, you know, climb the mountain. And so he said, you're a pastor, so you understand things like prevenient grace, where people find themselves doing the right thing before they even know what they're supposed to be doing. That God shows people how to change their life and how to act. And many times it's just instinctive to them when God comes into their life and the Holy Spirit starts working on them. So I said, yeah, I understand that. He said, well, you were just following protocol and you didn't know what the protocol was. And he said, often when God wants to call a minister to a native ministry, ministry to indigenous peoples in South Dakota, he said he does so from off of Bear Butte. And he said, so you've had that experience, so you've got some kind of work to do in South Dakota. And so anyway, you know, since that time, this is like, I think 2005 when this happened. And since that time, you know, I've climbed Bear Butte about 4 more times, and in ceremony with Native Christian people, and it's been very powerful. When I got to South Dakota to actually take up residence there, October the 13th, 2005. When I got to South Dakota, I was taken downtown. There was a big rescue mission and a lot of Lakota people there. Lakota is the name that the tribe has for themselves. Sioux Indians are what the Army gave them, which means enemy. So most all your native tribes have a name that they name themselves, and then a name the Army gave them in derision. It's kind of like, you know, the Jesus followers being called Christians. And they were called Christians in derision, but it came like a label. And that's what Sioux Indian means. But the Lakota people in South Dakota, I remember hearing on the street one say to another, that's that Bear Butte man. So word got out in the tribe that I had, you know, no intentions of moving to South Dakota and doing any kind of Indian work, but I got kind of pulled at Bear Butte, and I had an experience there. And it was at Bear Butte where a ceremonial chief would invite me to do some rodeo camps. I'd already done 4 in Tennessee with the professional bull riders, champions for the young people, and they asked me, I'd done 3 in Tennessee, and then they asked me at Bear Butte if I would come to South Dakota and do rodeo camps for the Lakota youth. which rodeos their football, there, and it's a big deal, and they're all horse people. Uh, and I did 4 camps, primarily bull riding camps. Brought the PBR champions. Mike Lee came twice. Cody Custer came once, and then Stetson Lawrence did my last one. And that was kind of the ministry I had out there, and it was a different kind of ministry. And as I said earlier in the other talk, um, when you have these experiences on mountains, your ministry gets transformed. And so mine got transformed from a primarily preaching ministry, evangelistic type ministry, to one of providing opportunities for young people on the reservation. And Henry Nouwen would say that's more of a nonviolent, confrontational type ministry. But we had a lot of success there, and between that and the music, the Lord really blessed me for those years in South Dakota. So that's the Bear Butte story. This one's a little long, but I gave this story on TBN. It was broadcast in 100 nations. Got all kinds of emails from Native people. So I give praise to God. I thank you for listening. Have a good day.